Hello, everybody. This is Portia Sabin. I'm the president of the Music Business Association. And tonight I am delighted to be partnering again with the National Museum of African American Music to present part 2 of The Sounds of Social Justice. If you missed part 1 of this panel, you can go to musicbiz.org and watch it. It was such a spectacular panel that we wanted to do it again. And this time we are gonna have our fabulous panelists answer questions sent in by viewers because we didn't get a chance to get to as many of those as we wanted to last time. And thankfully we got Gail Mitchell from Billboard to help us out again moderating. So take it away, Gail Mitchell.
Thank you, Portia. Appreciate that intro. And as she noted, welcome everyone to join who is joining us for the Sounds of Social Justice Part 2. As Portia noted, we are using a lot of the questions that we got that we didn't have time to answer on the first go round. But please feel free for the viewers today to jot any questions down you might have under the Q&A feature here on Zoom, and if we've got time, we will try to get to several of those before this time is up. So with that said, I wanted to introduce this session's panelists. Returning this time around, Henry Hicks III, President CEO of National Museum of African American Music. And we have Binta Brown, Artist Manager and Music Executive for Nice Work. We have Phil Thornton, Senior VP GM, RCA Inspiration. Monique Idlet Mosley, she is CEO of Rain Ventures. And new this time around, but not a stranger to any of us on the panel, is Theda Sandiford. She's Senior VP of Commerce and Digital for Def Jam. So welcome everyone, glad to have you here. Okay.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. All right. So I want to, since Theda's new to the panel, we'll let her start off things first. Wanted her to talk a little bit about the intersection of music creation and commerce. And now with everything that's happened over the last several weeks, how she's seeing social justice driven music created by her artists, how they're working with that angle in terms of music creation, but also how it's being consumed by consumers and used on and promoted by DSPs. So Theda, if you want to address that.
Yeah, so immediately after a lot of the social unrest, or really this huge awakening that has occurred throughout consumers, amongst our industry, even all our partners, the series of town halls that have occurred at all different businesses. I was a little concerned about this, some of the initial releases just coming from a commerce perspective. Initially at Def Jam, we moved everything off the schedule in that first week and only focused on amplifying the voices of our artists that truly had something they wanted to say about what was going on in the world. And initially, we saw that there was a lot of consumption that was down for that week. We saw a 3% decrease in consumption with Apple Music. Same with Spotify, and maybe a 4% decrease in consumption views at YouTube. And what we attribute that to is people were just out there mobilizing in the streets, and they just weren't listening to music in the way that they normally do. And then when we dug a little deeper, we looked at catalog from artists like Public Enemy and Kanye West, looking at Logic, just things in our particular catalog, and then looking further deeper into the Universal catalog, and some other songs like Childish Gambino, This Is America. Songs like that were up considerably. And so if we look at YG, the record that he chose to put out, which is Fuck the Police, we ran into a lot of troubles with trying to run advertising around that after we sort of held back on how we were spending money there, because we wanted to be respectful for what was going on and didn't appear to be capitalizing on a movement. We wanted the music to take hold and have consumers choose it for themselves. And what we found is that there's a small group of audience here, mostly moving into the suburbs right now when we're looking at the locations, people who are in this sort of racial awakening and latching on to songs that speak to how they feel. And the song like Fuck the Police is adding new listeners week over week in new areas that weren't traditionally his audience, which would be on the West Coast where YG is incredibly strong, but moving across the country in regions in Chicago, Detroit, down south, here in the Northeast. And it's a small number of people that are listening between 5 and 8 times a week. And anyone that works in streaming, when you have a song that's playing 5 and 8 times, lean forward consumption like that, that is a really strong indicator of success and a really strong indicator that the audience is really looking for songs that are talking about things, that are about how people feel, and are a reflection for, giving voice to the voiceless. And so for us in particular, we are looking at artists on the roster that have music, that have something to say about what is happening in this moment in time. And we are aggressively trying to get those things out because there's an audience for it. And we want to do it in a respectful way that isn't like, taking advantage, because that's not what this is about. We have artists that have always put out music that matters in terms of speaking to people's voices. People like Public Enemy, who just did the huge performance on the BET Awards. So we're looking at the artists on the roster, amplifying what they're already doing, and looking at artists that have always had a conversation and an interest in social justice and pushing them to the front of the line right now.
Yeah, Thea, before I go to other members of the panel, Kanye West has a new song, right? Wash Us in the Blood.
Yes, and the video done with Arthur Jaffra. This is a really powerful piece of art that he's done. Just taking, I don't even know how he got the permissions from the families to put that footage in the music video, but he felt very strongly about having a record, especially one dealing a clean record, focused on his faith and an inspiration for people to really just talk about what's actually happening out there and express the rage that so many of us feel at this time.
Okay, Phil, from your perspective, I know you were the RCA Inspiration, and that's gospel, but are you seeing that change happening in gospel too, in terms of protests and raising of voices?
Yeah, we've got quite a few of our artists that are using their platforms to speak out. Kirk Franklin being one of them. He's got a song called Strong God with the amazing lyrics. The video was powerful, and we got something new from Corinne Hawthorne that speaks to the times, that just saw the video cut for that. I was just trading emails with Sylvia Rohn, who was singing praises for the new video. We're working in tandem with Sylvia's team at Epic for that release. But yeah, it's I'm proud of the artists that are. I mean, like I said, we've got no shortage of releases, as Thea touched on, but you have to kind of prioritize those that really have to, it must get out today. And that's been the challenge of trying to figure out how to make it all work. And my commerce team is not exactly always pleased with me, but I remind them that we have to, provide the global stage for our artists when they have an important message. But yeah, I would say Kirk Franklin, Corinne Hawthorne, Travis Green has a new offering. His, it's more of an EP, but collaborations with various artists and some amazing visuals attached. So yeah, good to see gospel having a voice.
Right. And Binta, from your perspective, the artists you're working with, I know you mentioned some names the first session, but are you gratified? You had her that just released I Can't Breathe. Kedron Bryant, who we were speaking about earlier, just got signed by Warner Records, 12-year-old singer with on the list. So just your take on
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. First, looking at Peter's tracking and streaming, to Theet's point, Peter Cottontail, to Theet's point that, I remember specifically texting him saying, do not check your numbers this week because they're not going to be good, because you're not the only one who's out there protesting. Millions of people are protesting. We're going to see a decrease in your streams. Don't worry about it. The music is still right and for this moment. What we saw was a gradual uptick again. People coming back to the music, playing it again, which is great, particularly for a record that was released on Easter Sunday back in April. To have seen like some softness that everybody saw, and then to see the numbers starting to come back around. So. And then with another artist with whom I work, a young emerging artist out of Philadelphia. It's not that he's so young, it's just he's a new artist named Chemist. We've had a very good reception and a lot of people reaching out to him as well, who've been very interested in what he's doing and what he's saying. So, I think that's right. I'd like to think that I'm happy and I'm excited for us as an industry right now in this moment and with regards to this, because we should always be encouraging artists, to, as Steve so eloquently said, to give voice to the voiceless. I always think of the art that our artists make as being the great translators of the human experience, like having the ability to say and to express things in a way that the rest of us can't access as easily. There's great healing that comes from that. There's great inspiration. There's great courage that comes from that. So to hear label representatives confirming that's what they're looking to support, I think it's very gratifying. And I hope that all artists will be thinking about in this moment all of the different ways that they can use their voices and their art, because humanity needs it desperately.
Okay. Monique, I saw you shaking your head. Did you want to make a comment before I move on this side of the question?
Very briefly, I think that it's a time where all executives in the music industry should continue to allow artists to deliver their messages. I think that artists have always set the stage and the tone for what is happening in the world. And right now, they should absolutely drive these messages without stopping, without asking why. They need to get the messages out here. So congratulations to all of the executives who are doing that, because it's super important.
Okay. Henry, we'll start back here with you, begin with you, I should say. This was a question that came from the last group that watched the first half of this two-part series. Do you feel major music labels should revisit or expand a business unit dedicated to sales, marketing, and promotion of Black music artists?
Well, from what I'm gathering, it is being revisited. I think that Black music really is dominating the charts and really is leading the business for all of the labels now. And so, I think fundamentally, what I predominantly think is that the labels really ought to be looking to give those executives, those people who are leading the business, like Phil and Theta, opportunities to continue to grow and play bigger roles inside of their companies. Just because they are African American, they certainly have insight into African American culture and the ability to continue having their ear to the ground and putting the music in the streets that people will consume, people of all races and walks of life. But that doesn't mean that their experience is solely African American, and so they should have the opportunity to take their business skill and deploy it across the enterprise.
Okay. Theta, are you seeing that at Def Jam? What's your purview since you're with a major label?
Well, it's interesting when I started to see all the posts that were going out in standing with the Black community. And our post wasn't about standing with the Black community. We are the Black community. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done probably at all these major companies and probably at small companies too. I know that we're focused on that. And probably one of the biggest things that we can do is keep educating ourselves. Def Jam has a task force called Def Jam Forward. And as a group, we are working on thinking about issues related to voter registration and what we can do with our voices outside our building. But we're also looking at issues related to mental health. These are topics that are taboo often in our community. And so we want to be talking about them so that not only are we supporting ourselves as executives and young people coming up in the business, but also our artists. A lot of the art comes from their pain, having to deal with mental health issues. And so we want to make sure we're providing a framework of support for that. That is definitely a major focus, that we're really using all the resources and tools that Universal has to actually bring that type of development to the staff. And this is an initiative that's actually being supported by corporate, letting us say, here's what we need, and giving us the tools to actually go and do that. So we're also looking at insights, things that are important issues for our community, and how we can educate, not just from talking about when habeas corpus was suspended during the protests in New York City. A lot of people didn't know what that really meant. And so we want to be able to bring these concepts and understanding into the community in a way that is accessible. And so we're using our socials to do that. We're actively looking at who we do sponsorship with, and we're going through the checks and balance, like, is your money the kind of money we want to be having? And we're looking at that from our artist perspective too. And this is, normally from a label, whoever's got the money to put the product placement in the video, we're often trying to take that money, but we're really looking at who do we want to be associated with, and are they doing the right things for our community, and what kind of position and stake are we going to take, particularly as a Black label, a historic Black label. We want to be making the right choices, not only for the community, but for ourselves and our artists.
Okay, Phil, you were shaking your head just now.
I agree. I think it's an exciting time, and similar to our family at Universal. I mean, Sony Music, we're have a variety of task force. I'm fortunate enough to spearhead the Nashville task force, which will be announced in more detail shortly, Gail. So I'll be calling you to share. But it's an exciting time, and just I believe one of my executive sponsors, Elizabeth Pollen, is hanging out with us this evening. I love Elizabeth. She's been such an advocate and ally for us within Sony. Randy Goodman, Terry Hemmings, Rusty Gaston, who heads up Sony ATV. But having this amazing team of people who, one, recognize this is a problem. This is not just this is impacting Black people first and foremost, but this is a humanity thing. Because if you watch some of these horrific public lynchings that we've all seen, you can't help but to be somehow impacted and say, what can I do? And it's not just about, okay, yes, it's internally, what can we do? Because we need to look at, how are we advancing people of color? How are we hiring people of color? Down to recruiting of interns. And are we looking at the HBCUs? But then you look at, and on a community level, what are we doing? Like, how can we get more music involved in schools and funding? And you'd be amazed, there's so much there. And then advocacy, just really having a voice and working with our respective government relations team to really make a difference. So there's a lot there, a lot to unpack. It's not going to happen overnight, but I will say that we are aggressively looking forward to putting the $100 million that Sony is committed to good use. In every division, Columbia, Epic, RCA, Arista, and of course, Nashville, we're all having our plans, but also working together to see how there could be some overlap and some synergy within. But it's just exciting just to see. Because I know our proposal for Nashville alone was like 5-6 pages of just like our wish list, and just to hear the positive feedback and the response that Sony is like, yeah, let's go. Let's support on every angle. So Henry, I will be calling you because the museum is all up inside of the proposal, which we talked about on all fronts. But again, there's a lot of work there for us as a community to do. And it's one thing to, for companies to profit off of the art and the creativity of Black musicians and Black artists, but now to say, you know what, we're trying to get involved and make a difference and support. And it's not just we want to profit. They're like, we see there's a problem, and the 100 million from Sony, I mean, they're telling me that's just the first wave of money. So there's potentially more funding to come, and it's ongoing, which is really, really encouraging.
Okay, well, that dovetails into Benta. Last time out, for those that weren't on the first call, you guys had just announced the Black Music Action Coalition. So if you can elaborate a little bit, explain what that is for those who aren't aware, and then talk a little bit. I know you don't want to tell everything, but just how far you've gotten. I know it's only been a couple of weeks, but
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd say that our first we announced on the 22nd, so we're about eight days old. We've been planning for a whopping 4 weeks at this point, which in this day and age seems like a very long time, although of course it's not. So what is the Black Music Action Coalition? So it was born of a conversation that a small group of managers were having on Blackout Tuesday. And, like inspired by the two women, Jamila and Brianna, who started The Show Must Be Paused. And, as managers, what we do is we advocate, obviously, for the interest of our clients, in addition to helping them to build their businesses and to express themselves in a business sense. And so what we were trying to figure out was how could we make sure that our artists' voices were being heard, on the one hand, like with regards to the issues that they cared most about how to ensure that, there's always this tendency to look at what we do as, oh, they're the entertainers. They're not necessarily the thinkers or the activists, like it's the extra. At least that's how society has been a little bit recently, which is that's a separate conversation. But we wanted to figure out, how do we represent the interest, the goals of our clients, the things that they care about. And then on the other hand, like recognizing that our clients have massive fan bases. With a small group that started this, we thought that's political power, and that's the ability to make not just change within our industry, but change within our society. So how do we leverage that, and how do we use that, and how do we give voice to our artists through like on the outside? And so what BMAC does is on the one hand, we're working with industry, and we're specifically interested in like the advancement, promotion, hiring, pay equity for Black executives and Black staff. To the question that you were asking initially, that you started this round off with, like our perspective is that most music today is Black music, if not all Black music, if not all music, in some way, shape, or form. And so from our perspective, we just want to see many, many more Black executives with control over their budgets, with control over P&L statements, with discretion. The BET Awards, by the way, is the perfect example of what can happen when Black folks have control over the budgets and creative. And that's not to say that versus white folks. I'm just saying that that's a Black owned, well, it's owned by Viacom, but it's a Black run company. And there are many, many Black executives, including one of my cousins, who are involved in that production. They nailed it. They blew it out of the park, right? And so that's evidence of what we can do. So that's one aspect of it, which is thinking about the executives. The other aspect of it is thinking about the issues within the music business that specifically affect our artists, whether it's, like how the money that is being put together is spent. Since our artists helped earn that money, we think that our artists should have a say in how it's allocated related to the task force money. But it also goes to things like contractual issues and promotion budgets, and whether a Black artist has to start at rhythmic versus being able to go straight to top 40, which no white artist has that barrier. White artists, if the label is behind them, they can go right to top 40. So things of that nature. And then on the other side, looking out, what we're looking at is how do we leverage this to get people registered to vote, to share information about the critical issues, particularly the issues that are affecting the humanity and dignity of Black people in the United States? How do we help get people out to vote? So we've been involved with the repeal of Rule 50A. We were involved with the Justice and Policing Act that just passed in the House. And we have our hands in a whole bunch of other things, some of which I can't really talk about right now, but because it wouldn't be appropriate to make an announcement at this point. But we're making progress. We are extraordinarily excited by the reception that we've received, not just from the artist community and not just from the fan community, but quite frankly from the record business as well. I mean, we've heard from virtually everybody at this point. In the process of setting up meetings, we put that 30-day deadline in there. It looks like we're going to be able to make it in terms of having our initial meetings and getting things going. And so, this is an exciting time. What we all have to do, though, is commit to keep working at it. The one thing that, it's not discouraging to me, but the one thing to think about is that there are some people with whom we work every day who are looking forward to the moment when all of this dies down and we start paying attention to the next thing. Our message is, there is no next thing. We're focused on the humanity and dignity for Black people within the music business, within the entertainment business, within our society. And we're not willing to ignore or to look aside any longer.
Amen.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Monique, from your perspective, working with venture investors and venture capitalists, that sort of thing, what was your reaction when you first heard about BMAC? And then how does that tie in to what you do? I want you to elaborate and let folks know who weren't on the first call, just what exactly you do. I know you've had both feet on it. You used to be at the record labels. You and I worked together on different projects, but how does all what Benta just said tie in with what you're doing and moving forward in terms of causes and things that you're aligned with?
First, I think that when Benta announced it to us 2 weeks ago, I was super excited. And then when I saw the email with the list of people involved, I was more excited. And at the end of the day, I think that when people like Phil, Benta, yourself, and all of us on here take accountability, not just for our own personal homes, but when we actually understand that when we get into positions, it's not okay that one of us made it, because that's not all of us making it, we all have to make it to justify that statement. It becomes our accountability and our responsibility to make sure that we're protecting the advancement of our communities. And, I still am involved in music. I'm still half owner of Mosley. I still, I'm a silent partner in some other labels. And I prefer to keep it like that, because from a venture side, I also realized I had that kind of light bulb moment years ago, like, wait a second, no wonder we don't have, boardrooms that look inclusive and C-suites that are inclusive, because we aren't investing at the seed stages of companies and the startup of companies. So I've made it my personal mission, and I use my personal money to invest in technology companies with founders that are Black and female. And I think that all of us have an accountability to understand kind of the investment side. And so whether it's the investment in the music artists or the investment in the executive side or in the media side, we all individually have a real accountability to make sure that we are progressively moving for real change, not just trendy moments, right? And that's what Benta is referring to, that we're not going anywhere. This conversation is not going anywhere, but more importantly, the action that we need to happen, the ones of us who are willing to make those sacrifices, we're not going anywhere.
Right. Okay. And Henry, listening to Phil, Theda, and Monique and Benta, how does that tie in? Explain to the audience who might not have been around how this ties into what you're doing with the museum and what you hope to achieve once it opens.
Yeah, well, I think our objective at the National Museum of African American Music really is to be foundational for all of this, the work that Phil and his colleagues do, certainly the work that Benta's doing, and the ambitions that Monique has and is advancing. Our objective is to be foundational. And so one of the things that we actually struggle with and have struggled with is even calling ourselves a museum. And so having 5 or 6 galleries and having the square footage to be able to tell the stories of the artists and the executives that have made and created Black music in this country over the last few centuries is central to our mission, but it's not all of our work. And so our work really is educational, and it really is about supporting the growth and the development of executives and of others who are leading the social justice fight in the industry as well. And so we really want to try to figure out how we can partner with Monique and Benta and Theda around their work to actually make it more impactful, to make it go faster, to make it grow bigger. And that's what we're really trying to do.
Okay, is it fair to ask you for folks who don't know, what is the time frame for the official opening? What's going on that front?
Yeah, so we will open the museum to the public, let's just say early fall. So you'll be wearing a light jacket, maybe a sweater, but you won't need your boots and gloves just yet. So we're working on a specific date, and hopefully in the next week or two, we'll be able to have something out to the public. We were delayed just a bit because of COVID, as people might understand, but we're getting there. We're almost there. So hopefully soon. I got to get board approval. Phil has to give me approval to tell you all the dates. So.
Got my vote, Henry.
I would like to add something to this last question is that people like Phil and Theda and Benta, who are dealing directly with the labels and working for the labels, this is an opportunity for them to really strategically be intentional with their ask for the board of Sony, the board of Universal, and to not just be okay with one thing, but to reach super high and negotiate down. So, it's my wish that everyone walk into their offices when everyone gets back into the offices, for them to understand they also have an accountability to ask way above what's in writing and to force them to make real change from a long-term perspective.
Monique, you already know I'm from humble beginnings. You tell me you got 100 million sitting there. We had pages worth of
out of the trillions that we made for the company.
Okay,
right?
So that's the first way. But again, you're right. We have a responsibility as Black executives to be that voice since we're at the table. And there's a number of executives that have really weighed in. But it's like, yeah, we have responsibility. Because again, we all know how much money is generated by way of R&B, hip hop, jazz, blues, gospel, etc.
Rock and roll, all of that.
Rock and roll, country. So it's
country too, right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. So when you think about that, it's important, and this is it's long overdue. But yeah, I just know my ask was so big. I was just in there like, me, I asked for the world. That's just how I'm. I went for it. Wait till you see it, and the way it's looking, it looks like everything is very favorable at this point. So, but yeah, I asked for more than I just said, let's just ask for all these scholarships. Let's ask for every single thing we can go for. And just, what's the worst that can happen?
Exactly. What is the worst thing that could happen?
Well, we've made some asks too. And one in particular is being able to take the election day in November as a day off, so that people aren't worried about having to be at work and going to vote. And we see that this upcoming election is incredibly important, and I think the corporation is actually very receptive to giving all employees the opportunity to have that day, not to be one where they're trying to figure out how they're going to get all their work done, but actually be able to go vote and make a difference and understand what that civic responsibility truly means. Now, listening to Phil, I feel like I need to ask for some bigger things. But, if we can get an ongoing mentorship program for the young people that allows them to be great, and that we can make the other executives around us, young people coming up, great. There's just so many things, more things that they'll be able to do, taking this into the future. So laying a groundwork for young people to take up this charge when when we're all tired and ready for the next thing, if we can actually come out of this moment in time with a path forward for them in the future, I think, that would be my big ask.
All right, along those lines, you talked about, Monique, I think you mentioned rock and roll, whatever. We've had our hands in all kinds of genres, and Henry knows with the history there of Black artists there in Nashville. But one of the questions that was submitted, and everyone can answer, was about Black people who want to not just work in R&B and hip hop or rap. They want to work in country. They want to work in, I met a guy today, he's a Black agent, but he came from classic rock, but he said he can't, seem to get a job in classic rock. So wanted to ask y'all's opinions about that, especially, why am I spacing your name? I'm looking at you, Phil, because of Kane Brown. I mean, that was so nice to look on that screen during the BET Awards and see a Black country artist on the BET Awards,
Yeah. Miguel, that's a testament to, once we have a seat at the table, as Monique's saying, like bringing in that additional voice. So shout out to our Sony Music National Chairman, Brandy Goodman, and who's been such an advocate and strong supporter of the task force. And he sent me Kane's song, Worldwide Beautiful. And I said, Randy, I got an idea. I said, I don't, it may sound crazy on the surface, but I think we should really talk to BET about Kane performing. And Randy, without hesitation, immediately was like, next thing I know, I'm on an email thread with Kane's manager, our head of publicity. I mean, it moved so quick. And then speaking with Jesse Collins and Connie Orlando at BET, grateful for them seeing the vision. And the end result was the first ever Black solo country performance on the BET Awards, the 20th year, for the first time they've had a Black country artist perform, and that was Kane Brown. So amazing, and just a testament and reminder, like, yo, we can do it all. But I'm just, man, like, country, rock and roll. So now I got dreams, Gil. I think I may abandon my inspiration side, and I'm going straight country now. So just look out for that press release short.
Yeah.
No, but why not? Why can't we have broader roles within the organization? Because I'm a person, my grandmother was from Chattanooga, Tennessee. That's how I know country music. I listened to country as a child, and Christian music, not gospel, like the Sandy Patties and that stuff, and just a lot of the, watching, was it Mitty Pearl and all these shows on TV. But again, so I have an appreciation, because country does come from, derived from the blues, and Black people created the blues and jazz and rock and roll. So to me, the company leadership should be reflective of the diverse culture in America. That's important. So we are not just R&B, we're not just hip hop, we're not just gospel. We have a broader, view and perspective. And I'm hoping that in the future we see more, executives in that C-suite. While I celebrate our chairwoman, Ms. Sylvia Rohn at Epic Records, and John Platt as our chairman of Sony ATV, those shouldn't be the few examples that we can point to as far as, people in the high level positions. I mean, Sylvia was first appointed chairwoman of Elektra in the early 90s. And it's sad to say that we haven't seen one since in the music industry. That is, to me, unfortunate, but that's a part of the conversation, as Ben is mentioning, that we've got to change it. And this is our time to change that conversation. But yes, we can speak into rock. Yes, we can speak into country, R&B, hip hop, because my degree is in marketing. I know how to market in different areas, and I know how to promote. So although there are certain nuances, but we're people that we can excel in anything we put our minds to. So yes, we should be involved in every area possible. That's just my humble opinion. So.
And that's so true, Phil. I was watching an interview that Little Richard did a long, long time ago. And, he reminded us in that interview that, the Beatles were on tour with him. Yep. They were opening for him. They were influenced by him. And so when you look at people like Little Richard, James Brown, who was backup singing for him at the time, we understand that our history is rich. Yes. Our culture is super deep. And the only boxes that we've been put into are the ones that we've allowed people to put us into, because we've never belonged into a box as a culture. And when it comes to the music industry, it was one of the most horrific experiences for me to watch executives actually box in artists based on their skin color, not based on the music, not based on the production of the music, not even based on who would like the music, literally based on the color of the artist. And again, you know, I push all of this to all of these amazing executives here, is that these are the times that we have to crush all of these things and take away the things that they have tried to implement into our culture. We are more than, quote unquote, the urban department. And by the way, that is how we've actually got away with getting rid of multicultural marketing firms, is because they were able to curate these urban categories and have one face as the head of it, and then do away with the dollars and the promotional dollars that we actually need to promote us and to support us. So for me, this is a time where everyone should be coming with a unified voice, especially with music, because music is what, to me, is the universal language. And so is our music, right? And we're part of the music industry. We're a big impact. And this is where we get to demand change for these issues.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, you know, when I was a girl, I used to run around shouting at people. You know, Black people are not monolithic. We're not monolithic. We're not all like, we are not all hip hop. We're not all rap. We're not. Well, I think most of us actually are R&B.
Yeah.
I think it's actually very hard to find a Black person who doesn't love R&B music, but and across the generations. But we are also rockers like Jimi Hendrix. He and I share a birthday. You know, like to my family's joy and consternation. Every November 27th, when I'm with them, which is oftentimes around Thanksgiving, so they get this, it's 24 hours of Jimi Hendrix coming out of whatever I'm listening to. You know, like I'm a classically trained musician. I went to conservatory for a semester. So like the idea is that we could be so narrowly, you know, we're a creative, expressive, brilliant, majestic people. And the idea that we could be so narrowly confined within these little boxes of where it's safe and where it's not safe, or where it's safe for us to be because it's not safe from somebody's perspective for us to be elsewhere, and how it limits the mind and what we think of ourselves, our capacity to do things. To me, that's dangerous. I want to bust all of those boxes. One of the most delightful conversation I had with somebody was with somebody in Christian music yesterday, not gospel, contemporary Christian music. And why do I make that specification? Phil knows why. Because CCM is not considered Black. You know, like the Black audience listens to Black gospel. The white audience listens to CCM. There's no overlap, but yet it's all the word of God. You know, like how is it that we can segregate the word of God when on Pentecost, you know, the Holy Spirit came down and saw all of us speaking in different languages and yet understanding one another? It doesn't make any sense. It defies common sense. So I think that we need to bust through all of these different stereotypes and boxes so that people can be the fullest expression of themselves wherever they are, as they are, you know, when they are.
Yeah, I just want to, on to Vince's point, just that's what I really appreciated about the BET Awards this year. We saw everything from Roddy Ricch to a tribute to Little Richard, to Kane Brown, to Karen Clark Sheard. I mean, that's the breadth, and, you know, just thinking about how vast what we do. And Vince, to your point, we are more than just one genre. And that's why I really thought that show really represented Black entertainment and Black culture and just our contribution to the world in such a way. But that was so right on time, and but we need more of that. So Monique, as you mentioned, executives, when you have an opportunity to be at the table, be in the room, be in these boardrooms, I just think that's a great example of really using your platform. And it's no different. BET's doing their part, but we as label heads, we as entrepreneurs, attorneys, managers, we also have a responsibility, because sometimes I saw some of the comments on socials about, why is a country person on BET? Y'all, country started with Black people. Stop it. Do your homework. Like, it's just, you know, like, you know, again, you don't even realize just the roots. But that's why I'm excited, Henry, with the museum, because I think there's an opportunity there to really tell the story. And to
really kind of breaks up the narrative and kind of repositions it and really welcomes everybody into the Black experience instead of the other way around. And, you know, sort of on your point of country music, not only was country begun with Black folks, but it's the fastest growing demographic within the country audience is African Americans.
Yeah.
And so, African Americans are loving it. So, get ready for the country video show on BET. It's coming.
I told you I'm going over to the country. I'm working on country now, Henry. I didn't told
There you
y'all.
go. Come
You heard
on,
it here first. You heard it here
Listen,
first.
it's already huge in the West Indian community. You just go down to the islands and you could just hear all the reggae versions of these country records going way back.
Yes.
So that's already a thing. It's
Yeah.
already a thing.
I mean, you have to keep it. Actually, I'm going to withdraw that comment because there's, like through Appalachia going all the way up to Acacia from New Orleans, like it's not like the music dropped in parts of the white culture of folks who were in the mountains, white folks who were in the mountains, like on our way up all the way to Acacia, like Acacians in Nova Scotia. So, I mean, but there's something else that I just want to point out, which is that it's not just that Black people make all kinds of different music and are responsible for all kinds of different music. We also enjoy all kinds of different music, and we enjoy all kinds of different music when it is, and this is extremely important for the chairman and the heads of these companies who sometimes don't realize that a Black executive can be just as successful in punk or rock as a Black executive can be in hip hop or R&B, which is that we not only enjoy all of these forms of music and play all these kinds of music, we also enjoy it when it's not necessarily Black people who are performing it too. Like the idea that we need to be constrained to, okay, this person has a darker skin hue, therefore they must be interested in either Black gospel or R&B or hip hop, and then that it stops and that it doesn't expand beyond that at all. It's such a preposterous notion.
Well, I mean, honestly, if we just look at the global streaming charts, we can see that you don't get to #1 on that chart unless you have global consumption. And that's people from all walks of life all over the world. And that's ones and zeros, people, and they add up. And so we really should be thinking about ourselves as culture purveyors, where we're representing the best of our culture to the world. And it is now served on the platter for all types of people to enjoy. And with that moment, when we're as culture purveyors putting it out there, there has to be an opportunity to have a seat at the table to really represent the voices in a way so that everyone else can truly understand the history and where this is coming from. But you don't get to be Roddy Ricch at #1 on the Spotify chart unless people in Germany and France and Australia and people that don't look like you and I are loving this music. So really, it's just about owning the responsibility of what we're putting out there into the world and just making it accessible to everybody because they already love it.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately too often that's forgotten. And so, folks sort of in their headphones or on their radios in their car, they're listening to this music, but then by the time we step outside of those places, that's forgotten. And so we've got to do things like create a museum to remind people where the music came from, who's listening to the music, why it's interesting, why it's culturally relevant, and why it matters even in moments like this where we're dealing with COVID-19 and we're dealing with social injustice, why that music matters and matters to all of us. And so, that's why it's so important to have conversations like this today as well.
And we've always been the architects of culture, which then is the music and the lifestyles and the whole entire experience. And, while we're fighting for a seat at the table, I would also encourage everyone to understand that you can create your own tables.
Right.
And whoever believes in it will come sit with you. I'm a firm believer in that to keep forcing yourself at somewhere just so a checkbox can be marked. We have a lot of power, and when you believe in what you're doing, it will happen. And so I also encourage people to create the things that don't exist. You don't have to wait for someone else to create it for us. We can create what we need for our culture, for our communities, and it will be self-sustaining if we put that same energy into it that we give to these corporations that don't really care what's happening or going on unless they're forced to.
Well, that kind of leads into a question I've gotten here from one of our viewers. Says here, considering the current discussion, how do you feel about labels restructuring into quote unquote pods of team members assigned to specific genres?
Well, the pods have always failed in the past, so that's not going to work. Pods have all failed. Pretty much
Trying to get away from, right?
anytime I've seen a pod, they were like, "Ooh, we're going to do this new thing. It's going to be a pod," and then within a year, the pods is gone. This shit doesn't work.
iPod.
What? iPod? Oh, unless it's an iPod. Even that's not a thing anymore.
Right. And you know what, Gail? I'm gonna say this is that the music industry has never been the community that has actually set the tone for something. They've always been able to ride off of what management and the internal teams have been able to do. And so the reality is that if we're waiting for the executives at the label to make a way, it's not going to happen. People like the talent that you have on here are the ways that things are going to actually happen. And pods is not it. It's no. They don't even have R&D departments at the labels,
Yeah,
which lets you know that if you don't have R&D and you're not reinvesting back into your business model, right? How in the world will you ever be able to predict what's going to happen in the future with your industry? You cannot.
Honestly, I think genre is not even the question here. And I know we're thinking about genre, but it's really about audience. And if we think about the audience and what the audience wants, and they listen to all types of genres now. This concept of I listen to urban radio, that is not a construct that means anything in the modern day music business. And so the audience and their perceptions and their tastes, they want a wide variety of music. So we think about not in a way, which is kind of hard for a lot of music executives to hear, if we have an artist first and an audience first point of view, what are the consumption patterns of the audience? What moods and activities are they participating in that they want to use music to accompany that so it becomes the soundtrack of their life? Then genre doesn't really play into that. It's not even, am I speaking to a Black audience? It's, am I speaking to someone who is, I just want to chill right now, or I need my NSFW because the kids have been put to bed. And so when we think about the actual audience first, then that changes the whole dynamic of what we're talking about, where there's this a separate Black division and a pop division. Then it's just music.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that happening in the next 3 to 5 years? I thought really, has any of that kind of moved away, especially with streaming?
I think streaming is accelerating this right now. I think it's happening right now. And I think a lot of people who aren't fully invested with streaming yet, that don't see it yet, that are holding on to the old paradigm, they got blinders on. But this thing is moving very fast. Like I said before, you don't get to #1 on that Spotify or Apple Global chart without having consumers from around the globe that may not even speak the same language with you, that don't have the same cultural experience with you, but they're relating to something in this music that makes them either forget their problems or gives them a voice for something that they're actually feeling for themselves. So I think we're in the middle of something that is going to be a dramatic shift. And if we look 5 years from now and look back on this conversation, you're going to be like, oh yeah, of course.
Okay. All right.
And I even wonder how many artists would prefer not to be classified in a genre. So
they
many
want to
of
be
them-
artists.
Manager here. I
Yeah,
can tell
just
you,
artists. And so, they just want to create good music.
Mhm.
right. I mean, I do know some artists who are and who will say that they in their mind are creating music that is specifically for Black audiences and for Black people to hear. They're not. That doesn't mean that they don't want non-Black people to hear and listen to it and consume it, of course. But what they're doing is a little bit different. But with that said, like I think about Peter's project. Like Peter's project is a gospel project, but it's a gospel project that borrows heavily from R&B, soul, and hip hop, and that's intentional on his part. And like we struggled, quite frankly. Like we knew it was a Christian album, but when we started looking at all of the different types of genres that we could choose, we were like, well, where do we put this? Like all we know is that it's Christian and that he's like, it's biblical. And I said, all right, let's put it down as inspirational then, like, which was the category that was the catch-all for Christian music. So but almost every artist I know doesn't really want to be thought of as a specific genre. And most artists want their music to be heard as broadly and as widely as possible, because they're conscious that not only is their art for themselves, but their art is also for their fans, and it's also for humanity. It does something bigger. They know what their experience with the music is.
Right.
And I think that there's, as we're witnessing right now, there's going to continue to be huge shifts in how the artists perceive their audiences. And, the millennials, in my opinion, are the first generation to actually hear true history and have access to real history from a world perspective, especially the African-American history and our history from Africa. And so as we see the millennials and younger, the Gen Zers and on, they are not restricted by the same things that we were restricted by. And so I think that we're going to continue to see the music industry, the executives in particular, be forced into a change that they haven't traditionally had to deal with, because these younger kids, they come with a much more unified voice and a much more unified perspective.
Yeah, real quick, Theda, you were talking about streaming, but what about, somebody just wrote a little comment about, terrestrial radio. You see that changing too? They're going to have to change?
I mean, I think it's going to be slower for them to change, because it is so, it's that old paradigm there. I mean, I think it's going to be slower to change. Pop radio meant popular. So now that hip hop is popular, or even someone like Kanye can do a hip hop gospel and that can get played on the radio as popular music. So I think we're going to see more genres sort of blending into that arena. But I feel like the traditional radio station always served, I got my start in radio, so we weren't just playing music, we were a part of the community, in the same way that the independent retail store would be a part of the community. These were places where someone who looked like you or thought like you was telling you what was really happening that you weren't really getting elsewhere. And I think that still serves a purpose within our communities. So I don't see that changing very rapidly, but over time, again, similar to what Monique was saying with the millennials and zennials, their views on genres are completely different than our own. And so long as the radio station or the things that the outlets that traditionally had serviced specific segments of the community are still doing that, then there's still a purpose there. On the calls that we did a couple of weeks back with the independent retailers that were really talking about how much they were hurting due to COVID. One of the things that I really took away from that conversation is that the individual retailers missed being a part in that community, having the day-to-day relationships with the members of their community. And I feel like radio does that still to this day, and so does independent retail.
Did you all see the announcement on from iHeart? Was it the Black Information Network that they announced? Hannah, did y'all see that? What they're doing at iHeart?
No. Explain real fast.
I'm reading a press release, so bear with me. I don't have this all. I'm still processing, but it just says Today marks the launch of Black Information Network, the first and only 24/7 national and local all news audio service dedicated to providing an objective, accurate, and trusted source of continual news coverage with a Black voice and perspective. Yeah, this is from iHeart. This just came out today.
Wow.
Okay.
So they're
Podcasting, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's giving me a little bit of hope because Theta, I was looking when you asked about terrestrial radio, I was like, okay, thank God Gil didn't come to me because I got, but up until no, because again, I think radios. I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and we had a hometown radio station, WOWI, and I was like the voice and the heart of the city. Like, what was going on the college campuses, at the barbershop, anything just in the community. But radio, because of a variety of reasons, has this changed, and everything is just sounded the same, no matter if you were in Virginia or New York. So to see iHeart really make this announcement, and they've got a lot of great corporate partnerships, I'm encouraged. I saw an email today from Tom Pullman and Thea and Doc Warner and everyone. So Gail, I'll share that, but it seems encouraging. Just if that's, because I think that's what radio, when we think of radio and what BLS represented and KJLH represent, like just that community voice, and we need it.
Which KJLH still does. Thank God for Stevie and a handful of those stations that are out there. But Benta, this goes into, and everybody, it goes into one of our last questions here, and I'm going to have to read it. But when you mention this iHeart deal, it kind of brings to mind this question, which is workplace equality in terms of people of color being hired at labels, at radio stations, just who is. This is a great notion on concept on iHeart's part. So how do we ensure that the folks at these companies are genuinely connecting with the existing staffs of people of color there, and also making sure they're spreading the word when it comes to hiring and making it truly an inclusive process? And maybe Benta can speak to that first because of BMAC, and then the others weigh in.
Sure. I mean, it's a question I'm still thinking about. I'm actually still a little bit on the last question about terrestrial radio.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was really interesting to me. Like Phil, thank you for sharing that press release with all of us. Because iHeart, which was formerly known as Clear Channel, was the beneficiary of the 1996 Telecommunications Act, which is what enabled, I know that people know this, but I want to just get the history out, because this was policy, this was government policy that allowed for consolidation of the airwaves, that got rid of the diversity of voices. Yep. And also not just the diversity of voices, but the diversity of music. Before 1996, when I was growing up, part of the reason why we had all of this diversity on the airwaves was because there wasn't this law that enabled all of this mass consolidation. And consolidation and anti-competition actually are really bad for diversity. Right. And if we want to have diversity, if we want to have, because diversity, inherent in diversity is competition, Competition is different actors engaging in an activity together with derivative benefits, derivative social benefits for society or whatever the entity is, right? When you have legislation that takes away competition, then you're going to take away diversity as well, and that has had particularly onerous negative effects for broader society, because, like I said at the outset, we end up being in this situation where if you turn on Top 40, you're hearing music performed by white artists. You're hearing a white perspective on issues. You're losing the local connection that we all used to have. And so just to highlight and to reiterate, this was a function, and I'm not saying that it was I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories or anything of that nature, but the fact that act, and that we had a federal policy that allowed for that consolidation to occur, it had really deleterious effects for our society, not to mention individual artists and voices. But in terms of like how we get there, I think part of it is making the commitment to do it. I was in a meeting with somebody earlier today who was trying to take a board and flip it to be like 40% Black, Asian, and Latin on the board. And I had a bad reaction to that. And the reason why I had a bad reaction to that there was because it needs to be a function of a deep internal change. These can't be, like we can't, like tokenism has never been a successful palliative for racial equality or solving inequality. It never has been, and it never will be. It doesn't work. It's bad for the token, and it's bad for everybody else around the token. And it's bad for the people who don't get chosen to be the token for that particular point in time. Like, it's just bad. And so I think that how we get there in terms of elevating and advancing more people, more voices, is by first looking at ourselves, understanding how it got there, acknowledging some really important truths, and then making a commitment, out of love and humanity to change, to open up the doors, to have more internship programs, to have more mentoring. Like we often talk about, like putting programs into the HBCUs and community programs and whatnot. But keep in mind that like Black people, just like we listen to all kinds of different music, we are also kind of everywhere. Like we are at community colleges, we are in community programs, we don't always necessarily live in a Black neighborhood. And so we need to find as many different ways as we possibly can to reach out to non-white people, to give them the opportunities to come along. One last thing that I'll say on this, something that I think about a lot, and maybe Monique can help me with this, is a business idea I've had for years, and maybe it's time to get it off the ground, which is that, like recording studio, like I think about Motown, or, Muscle Shoals, or the Sound Factory, or what we're trying to do, some of what we're trying to do in Chicago, which is, like recording studios, which were closely related to radio stations upon a time, open up their doors to the community. Young kids can come in, they can learn the craft, they can learn about the business, they get mentored, like that. It creates movements around music, it spreads and it expands. It's so necessary to have things like that kind of accessibility and that kind of access. I think that we have gotten so corporatized, and everything has gotten into these private towers that are at the very top of buildings, that young kids can't, they can't do that hustle where, like the story goes in Motown, that they were walking down the street singing when maybe Berry Gordy heard them and then signed them. Like we need to have something that opens up our communities. Maybe it's the museum. It could be a whole combination of things that open up our society again, where we're not so afraid of each other, and that kids can have the opportunity to expand themselves, to be seen, to be heard, and to experience all of the opportunity that exists.
Well, Binta, I would love to talk to you about that, because I actually bought a historical site in Chicago that is about 20 acres with 2 buildings on it that we are going to turn into a youth center for the arts and for music. So we should definitely discuss that.
Let's put a radio station in it.
I always felt when radio syndicated that it was to the detriment of our community, because radio was the voice for our communities. That's how we learned politics. It's how we learned what was happening everywhere. And it was coming from a perspective that was relatable. And so I wish for it to get back to community driven. And also, by the way, that is where we were able to discover amazing music. That is why I love SoundCloud, right? Because you are able to discover the most amazing music that won't ever, be on top 40, and it's not on repeat. So, it's super exciting to have outlets like SoundCloud, continue to speak for the indie artists and the emerging talent. So that's exciting.
I got one thing to add to this conversation. If I look at whenever there were changes in our business, and a lot of it happened because independent entrepreneurs started labels, developing artists, and they started to have success, and then they went and did joint ventures with these larger companies, and then that got assimilated within the larger organization. And so if we know that has been a cyclical pattern that has happened, where our music and the culture has been developed independently and then moved inside, I think it's so important to look at investment in these indie voices. And I mean, here I'm sitting at one of these major labels that actually got absorbed into one of, into a large corporation. But if we're looking at mentorship and looking at developing and looking at investment, we should look at independent business people who are developing the next crop of talent. Because if we're developing those executives, when they do get absorbed, because there'll be a big check at the end of the rainbow, and maybe they will learn and have access to resources so that they don't have to go down that route. But often that check is alluring and it's out there at the end of the rainbow, that there is a new group of young executives, entrepreneurs that have been developing, that have the background maybe in with the financial literacy, as well as the culture, or their finger on the pulse of the culture. And that could be that next wave that institutes the change that we're all sort of working towards.
That's right. That's right. For the last 2 days, I've been on with book publishers. And it was so overwhelming to me that there weren't any Black or brown faces on the senior level. And yet they were pitching to, publish a book that is all about the movement. And so what I said to the agents is, listen, if you don't demand for there to be some Black and brown faces on a senior level, you can't even be the agent. And they're like, well, Monique, this is the book industry. I don't care what industry it is. We have to demand the change. And we cannot go into business with anyone who's not willing to check and balance internally.
Exactly. Yeah. Very true. Very true.
That's very true. It reminds me of a story I heard about Beyonce when she was doing her shoe deal, that she went into another company that I'll leave nameless and walked into the boardroom, and there was no one of color in the entire boardroom of almost 30 executives. And I heard she got up and walked out, allegedly. And then when, and that's how Adidas ended up, partnering with her. But there was another shoe company that, originally was supposed to be her initial partner from what I'm told.
And the same thing's happening on the journalism side. I read an article, I think it was in Vice, about how journalism is going down with the newspapers and whatever, but it's especially hitting hardest people of color that are trying to be writers and reporters and break in and do what I do. So that is scary. And to your point earlier, Benta, I've gotten so many calls and texts from people who are, for want of a better word, tokens at their jobs, because they said they've just been inundated with phone calls and meetings and things. And what do we need to do? What do we need to do? And there's just a lot of pressure there. So I hope people do listen. And as you said, with BMAC and all the rest of you, open the doors up, because it's a lot for just those of us who are inside now to try to, help you all. You have to make your own commitment too. Don't just depend on us to do this. A lot of this has to do with what's going on at these companies.
Well, I mean, I think, and now is the time to push back. Now's the time to fight back. And now's the time to remind those corporations of the economic value that we bring, whether it's in publishing or in the music industry or in any other business, is to say, listen, we are creating economic value and economic wealth, and we deserve to be a part of making the decisions. We deserve to be a part of building the business, and we even deserve and should be responsible for creating our own businesses that will grow up and be either consumed by these larger companies or perhaps consume the larger companies on the way down. So, we've got to speak up and not just articulate our frustration, but articulate our value so that people will then pay attention. It's all about the green ultimately. So everything that we're fighting for, everything that we're resisting, everything that we're frustrated by in this economy, in the American economy, is all driven by money. And so that's the way that we fight back, is by reminding people of the economic value that we create.
There's two companies that have stood out during this last few weeks, and that would be Netflix, who just recently announced, not keeping less than 2% of their income in Black-owned business banks, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's $5 billion, that is a lot. That allows Black banks to give mortgages, which now we're setting people up from the predatory lending and avoiding all of that. And also Twitter, Jack Dorsey has been super heavily involved. And so it's also our accountability to know the companies that aren't just participating in trendy things, and that we go into business and support those corporations that are really trying to make impact and change in our communities. And billions of dollars in Black banks will literally change our communities on a major level. Because as Henry said, it's about the money at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Netflix just hired a new Black chief marketing officer. So kudos to Netflix.
Boz.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did. That's right. I just got that before the call. Yeah.
Of course.
Exactly. So we're closing in. We're down to the last 10 or so minutes. One question that's mine that wasn't on the list. I just want you each to give me 1 or 2 things you would like to see have happened by this time next year in relation to what you're working with. Henry with the museum, Benton with BMAC and your projects, and the 3 of you music labels, investing, venture capitalism, that sort of thing. Monique, so what 1 or 2 things would you like to see or have happen by the time we reconvene this time next year? Henry?
A new president.
Well, there's that.
We're working on that.
Exactly. All right, that's 1. Henry?
Yeah, well, so in addition to having the museum open by this time next year, I really would hope to be working with each of the big labels on some significant cultural advancement initiative and be really assisting them in doing that and in driving that forward.
Okay. Benta?
Oh, I mean, was it Monique who said, like, aim high and as big as possible?
Right.
I in addition to have gotten out, a bunch more great, like culturally significant and revenue generating albums, which is always my goal as management and a music executive. I hope that we will have not just put a plan in place to address racial inequity within the music business, but I hope that we will be executing against that plan successfully, and hitting the benchmarks that we want to set, so that when we do our first scorecard, that evaluates our progress, that every company has an A+. Like that's the goal, is for every company to have an A+. And from there, like my hope is that we can replicate what we're doing in the music industry, in the advertising business, in sports, in film, in television, because it's just vitally important. If we want to address and affect implicit bias, which is a fancy way and an academicized way of saying, if we want to all stop being racist internally, then we have to change the messages that we're receiving. And we have to rewire ourselves. And that comes through music, film, television, sports, media, all of the different things that are selling strange things that make us feel badly about ourselves and badly about one another and less likely to trust one another. We got to remember that our brains are trying to simplify all of the time. It's how we're wired. It's part of how you survive. And if you don't know somebody, then you reach to the messages that you're getting through politics, media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is so harmful for our country. So for me, it's hitting our benchmarks, executing against strategy, and getting out some really amazing albums. Breaking more artists. I want to break artists every year for the rest of my life.
Monique?
I would say that, this time next year, I hope that major federal policies have been changed. I know we're fighting for a lot of it because I do believe that until at the highest level for policy to be changed, we're going to keep having these unfortunate situations that keep occurring. Secondly, I would love to see the number and the percentage of less than 1% of VC funding goes to Black and Brown founders. We have to get that number changed. We actually have to get artists and the people of our culture to also understand the importance of investing back into Black and Brown founders. Because economically, until we can play at a higher level, we're gonna keep being at the unfortunate side of things. And more importantly, I can't wait to see the music industry change. And this time next year, I hope that these dollars have increased from these corporate commitments. I hope that we see a lot of the young people being mentored and prepared to take positions and start replacing some of the outdated thinkers. And more importantly, just as a human people, I hope that this time next year that we have allies from all over the world in large, large numbers, that it's not just a trending topic or of the moment, that we are really all standing in like conformity and unity with a unified voice on the rights of people, just as human beings.
Yeah.
Rita, other than a new president, what else?
Well, I mean, I look at our music, you know, music sells everything but itself. And when you think about that, you know, it's a jingle in an ad, or it's a song that's used in a trailer for a film or a TV. Music's used for all of that. And so if we think about the music we're putting out and how it's being used in those different ways, then we have a responsibility. So I hope for the future that artists who have something to say that is unique about this moment in time, because this is a reflection of our history, and the history is told by the victors. And the music lasts forever. And since it will be used in so many different ways to present other products, that we have a really unique opportunity to have, I mean, I love the fact that there's, you know, someone representing a museum here, but literally in perpetuity, the music will be presented in such a unique way. And I just am looking forward to the different types of voices that are going to come out. They're, regardless of what genre it's coming from, and makes a difference in how people actually see the culture. And you know, I see the change happening. Me, someone working in digital media for as long as I have been, I went from not being allowed to speak at the table because no one cares about websites to, you know, that is how our main consumption and how we make money now, through streaming. So I see that the changes may be long in coming, but they're also happening very fast behind the scenes. And I think we're going to be having an interesting conversation a year from now, and we might actually have, like, you know, a protest music that becomes a moment in this time, so that regardless of who's president, that becomes the moment of record for this time.
Exactly. And Philip.
Well, I hope a year from now to see all of these amazing smiling faces here again, so we can assess, you know, where we are and what we have accomplished. I would be proud to announce that we probably would have spent far more than that 100 million into the community that Sony's committed, onto hopefully another few hundred million, because again, it's about reinvesting into the community. But I'm really passionate about a year from now seeing the museum open, being able to walk in there and see all the, just feel the energy and all the hard work that's been put into it, but also just on an education level, put more into the schools, not only just here in Nashville, but just, you know, whether it's, you know, high school and music schools, but also on a HBCU level and beyond. Because I've, you know, people I've hired that didn't go to an HBCU. I'm a proud graduate of an HBCU, but how can we further create that talent pipeline? And I know it doesn't happen overnight, but I think a year is more than enough time for us in this, you know, respective companies to create those strategic partnerships with universities to create that pipeline, to see how we as, the industry can get more involved. I would love to see BMAC and the labels and all of us work together on a variety of things. I just want to see more unity because I think we're all doing some amazing things, but it starts with me, and I'm going to be more intentional. I've got Benta's info. I've got Theta's info. I've got Monique's info. And of course I got Henry's info. So, but again, but it's important that this is more than ever that we have one voice and figure out how we can come together and really impact real change. So I'm looking at it on all fronts, but I want to see us really just have more of an impact in the community and really help our youth. So that, whether they want to be an executive or they want to be a writer and producer, let's help them. Let's really pour into them and just hold our companies accountable. But
Well,
Bill,
thank you all.
I got a proposal, Bill. I can't wait to tell you about it.
And Vincent, everyone wants you to go into politics. I've been seeing in the comment section, you got a lot of people saying you should go into politics.
Exactly.
So you got my vote.
Well, thank you all very much. I'm here to help share and tell stories. You talked about unity, Phil, and everybody on here I've spoken to before, and you all know that that's where I'm at. And so I'm here. Let me know what way I can help, spread the word from where I'm at, because it is the time. If we're going to do something now, it has to be done now. It's a day of reckoning, and we can't let this time go. It's too much time has elapsed. We got to do this and push forward. So thank you, Henry, Benta, Monique, Theta, and Phil. And thank you to Nick and Portia at Music Biz for this opportunity once again.
Can we say thank you to you, Gail? Because you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail.
Guys, appreciate it. Really do. Thank you. You make it easy. So thank you all. All right. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.